I had my questions on my notepad, and I probably missed a good follow-up question. So I appreciate that
Oh yeah.
transparency. Like, just be there having a conversation with them. Don't be worried about you're going to miss something.
And to jump in on that, your subjects will appreciate that because they see that you're listening and you're actually absorbing what they're saying. And that, I mean, hey, we all have egos. We all want to be listened to. So when you're asking follow-ups that harp specifically on what someone said, you get better stuff and you open that subject up 9 times out of 10.
Welcome to the Next Level Journalist, where you will hear from some of the best journalists in the business or who have been there, done that, and willing to share with you what they've learned so you can get better, faster.
My guest today is the Houston Texans TV host and Senior Integrated Media Manager, Drew Dougherty. Thank you so much for making time for this today.
Anything for a friend of Brian Giesenslaw. It's always great to see you, Kyle. How you been, man?
Hey, it's great to see you, Drew. And yeah, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Brian. So when he sends someone my way, I'm excited to talk to them, and I have no doubt you're going to deliver a ton of value. So no pressure, as Brian had you high up on his list of people I should talk to.
Lots of pressure. Those are some high expectations when that guy's puffing you up like that.
Well, I have no doubt this is going to be a good conversation, Drew. So let's jump into this, and you give us an idea of what your journey's been like, your journalism journey, and basically when you got interested, and bring us up to speed on what you're doing today.
Yeah, well, first things first. Where I am right now, I don't want people to think, I'm pretending something I'm not. I'm not a journalist right now per se. I work for the team. I work for the Houston Texans, so I'm not a journalist. I don't want anyone to think that I'm claiming to be or all that. I'm definitely partial, obviously. But before that, grew up in Houston, went to SMU for college, and I triple majored in Spanish, Latin American studies, and print journalism while I was there. Graduated in 2000, and while I was at school, I worked for the school paper for a semester and covered women's golf, men's golf, women's basketball, cross country, all the non football sports basically. I covered the women's basketball team. I think I said that. Did that, and then for about 2 years, I was a freelancer at an area newspaper that kind of covered the area around SMU as well as a lot of North Dallas. So I covered a lot of high school football on Friday nights and learned a heck of a lot doing that. And then when it came time to find a job after graduation, I sort of pushed all that to the side and thought, well, I gotta get a real job and get out in the world. And so I took a job at Bank One, which is now, there was a big bank then, and it was absorbed by a bigger bank in Chase Bank. And I spent 5 months in this management training program, and I was kind of daydreaming. And a girl that I'd written with at the school paper called and said, hey, I'm moving. I'm getting married. I'm moving to Seattle. Would you like to interview for this producer job I have at a TV station here in Dallas? And I pounced on it like a fumble. And that's where I met Brian Giesenslaw. And we worked together there for 4 years. It was called Texas Cable News, TXCN. So I was there as a producer for 4 years. And at the very end, I started filling in as an anchor. That folded. And a few months after it folded, I went down to Austin. And I was the editor-in-chief of Austin Golf Magazine. Had a fun time. I'd gone from a company of about 85 to 100 people to a company of 3 people, and then within a few months that went out of business. So in the span of 6 months, I'd lost 2 jobs in media, and I was pretty down on myself. But a couple months after the magazine folded, I moved out to Lubbock because I got a job at the Fox affiliate out there, and I spent 4 years there doing the sportscast. I was a sports director at KJTV, Fox 34. And 3.5 years, I was also the sports anchor at the Telemundo affiliate, which was in the same building. So I did sports 5 nights a week in both English and in Spanish. And I don't think there are too many others that have done that or do that.
Right.
And then met a girl in 2008 when I came back home to Houston for a visit. And we started up a long-distance relationship. And early 2009, I knew I wasn't going to stay in Lubbock, and I wanted to get back home to Houston. And I moved home in August of 2009. And shortly after I moved back, I got the job with the Texans. And then a year and a half later, I married the girl. And now we got 5 kids. So it's been good. But I've been with the Texans since 2009, and I've seen a lot. 3 different head coaches, a few different general managers, a lot of turmoil, a lot of fun times, and hopefully some good times again here in the future.
So how did you break through with the Texans?
It's interesting. I'd been out in Lubbock for 4 years, and while I was there, it was tremendous. I mean, it was my first on-air full-time gig, and I was a sports director, and doing the stuff in English and in Spanish. The stuff in Spanish definitely sets you apart. That's especially when you're, an Irish American speaking Spanish. But I did that, so just that alone, I think, was pretty noteworthy. Just doing the sportscast. But in addition to that, I hosted Mike Leach's TV show. So, after every game, win or lose, I had to get 5-6 minutes out of Mike Leach talking about the game for his coach's show. I interviewed him during the week on Wednesdays for the coach's show. So built up a good relationship with him. That was a lot of work. And then, when football season ended, I would host the Lady Raider basketball show. The Lady Raider basketball team, they had a coach's show, so I hosted that. I also called about 7 or 8 games that they would put on local TV. I did the play-by-play for that. So that'll sand off some rough edges and help make you better. So I did that for 4 years, about 40 games total. And then when baseball season came around, I was the host of the baseball coaches show for Texas Tech, and they would have about 3 or 4 games per year on local TV, and I would get to call play-by-play for that. So much fun. So got to do so many different things. Called play-by-play for the ASCO West Texas Football Classic. You had to say that every time you ever. It wasn't just the All-Star game. It was the ASCO West Texas Football Classic. And it was basically the panhandle of Texas, from the tippy top up where that little thin part of Oklahoma is, all the way down to about Midland, Odessa. A lot of high schools, a lot of small high schools. They each had about a couple players, 3 players, 4 players sometimes. They got to play in this last All-Star game before they went off to college in the summertime. So I called that for 4 years. And Gary Gaines was one of my color commentators one of those years. He was the head coach of Odessa Permian back in the 80s when they won the national title. But the year before that, he was the head coach that got profiled by Buzz Bissinger in Friday Night Lights. So just brushed up against a lot of interesting people when I was out in West Texas. And I think those experiences, the Spanish experience, and then one of my references for the Texans job, when they said list 3 references we can get in contact with, my third one was Mike Leach. And if you don't know who Mike Leach is, I mean, he's basically a Martian of a human being. I love him. I'd tell him that to his face. I'm eternally grateful to him, but he's a different breed. And I think if someone said that, I think he'd be like, that's probably accurate to a degree. But I listed him as a reference, and when they were checking references, I'll never forget, I had my last in-person interview here in the stadium. I'd had a few phone interviews in the lead up to it. My last interview went really well, and at the end, the guy who wound up hiring said, "Hey, is this really his number? Can I give him a call?" And I was like, "Call him." And so I went home that morning, and later that day, my boss, the guy who became my boss, called Leach at 3:27, and Leach picked up and said, and when they found out who each other was, he said, "Yeah, I've got 3 minutes. We're starting practice at 3:30." And so my boss started asking questions. And then at about 3:50, my boss said, "I think I've got enough information now. I really appreciate talking with you, Coach." And so, he said some nice things for me, and I'll always be grateful. So I think I had a nice combo of stuff working in my favor, but the basis for it was, I think I showed that I'm a hard worker. I think I showed that I'm pretty good on camera, and that I can interact with folks and get some good content out of people. So I think it was a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah, you just unpacked so much just in those first couple of questions there. But I want to touch on, and you and I didn't talk about this beforehand because I didn't realize, but you and I might have crossed paths at some point in West Texas. I worked at KOSA in Odessa in 2007 to 9 or 10.
We definitely.
So as you're dropping those West Texas bombs there, I'm thinking, I know exactly what you're talking about. So if anyone didn't know how small this TV industry is, there's a prime example right there. So small world.
Boy, yeah, you and I could we could have a long
We
conversation.
could talk about West Texas, everything, but
Yeah.
I want to respect your time and I want to respect the people that are watching this because they're not going to care less about your and I connection in West Texas. But I
Sure.
love that place. It's better as a memory though for me. So,
Mhm.
all right, Drew, let's talk about maybe how you broke through. I know I jumped right to your most recent breakthrough, but maybe talk about when you look back, say, this is how I broke through, and this is maybe what you can share with someone who's trying to break into that TV industry.
Certainly. Well, I was very lucky. I kind of mentioned it. I got the job through a connection, a lady that I'd worked with at the school paper. And she's now, boy, she's a massive success. She's up in the Northwest. Her name's Jen Mueller. She does the sidelines for the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, she is all over the place, and she's written a book. So I owe her a lot, and I'm very thankful for all the help she gave me. And I think she'd probably say, I wasn't much. I just, but she was very, very helpful for me. But once I got that job, when I got it, I was very young. I was 23. And the only job responsibilities truly were to book guests for a nightly sports talk show. And then once those guests were on the air, to screen the phone calls for this show. So this is basically a radio call-in show, but it was on TV. And it eventually became an hour-long show. And eventually, I would write the opening 10-minute newscast or sportscast, which was pretty fun. I mean, you really got to stretch your legs with this thing. And then I kept booking guests and all that stuff. But when I got that job, it was just those two responsibilities, and I was able to kind of grow that and take on more and more. So by the end of my time there, in 2004, in December of 2004, when we finished, I was still doing that show, producing it. I was also producing a show which Brian Giesenslaw was the main anchor on, and that was called Chevy Sports Day. And that was a 30-minute, basically sports center for the entire state of Texas. And so I would cut up all the video for that and write teases for that, help that thing get on the air. And that was a 30-minute show. And I would also fill it in as the anchor of that show a few times before I finished. And then I produced Texas Legends in Sports. It was sponsored by Cadillac. And that was really fun because that was a 30-minute show where we basically just went one-on-one with some legends like Mary Lou Retton, Earl Campbell, Darrell Royal, not Earl Campbell, excuse me, Nolan Ryan. I mean, we covered a lot of different big names, and we traveled down to Goliad, Texas, and we talked with Bum Phillips. I mean, just had a fun time doing that, and we also what was the other thing I did? Yeah, we also went to San Antonio, we went to Houston, we were based in Dallas, so we were traveling all over the state for that. But what helped me get on air, because I was hired as a producer, what helped me get on air was one of our other friends, Giesenslaw and I, a guy named Chris Pelican, he was an anchor. He really prodded me along and knew that I wanted to eventually get on air. And he said, well, you're not going to get on air unless you start doing air checks, which was basically fake sportscast, practice sportscast. And so what I would do on Saturday mornings when I wasn't working, I'd come up to the station and I would take the videos from the night before and I'd leave them in the order they were, but then I would rewrite the copy that went along with it. And I'd put on makeup, I'd put on a suit and tie, put the earpiece in, the mic on, and I would, through a lot of help from the producers and the directors who weren't having to work or there was a downtime, I'd say, hey, can you just do an air check for me for these 5 minutes? They were gracious enough to help me out with that, and I owe them so much. But I would do these air checks, and I'd take them to Giesenslaw, and I'd say, what do I need to work on? And he'd have a long list of, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then he'd have a longer list of, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And then he'd have a short list of, this was great, and this was great. Well, eventually, these two lists shortened, and that list lengthened, and Memorial Day, and I started doing that around, late 2002. So I did that about once or twice a month for the span of 2 years, and I would show it to him, and then I would also show it up to the news director. And by about Memorial Day of 2004, I was ready because people were going out of town. I said, hey, I won't go out of town. Give me a shot. Went on air and had my first sportscast then. It went pretty well enough that they let me keep doing it. They let me anchor that Sports Day show because the first sportscast I'm talking about was just like a small 3-minute CNN type of hit in the news wheel where they came to sports just at the very bottom of each half hour. And so I recorded that on Memorial Day weekend, and I was off and running.
That's good stuff.
But I think it was coming in on the weekend and showing people that I wanted to do it and showing people that I got better. I think that's what really helped me break through.
Yeah, certainly paying your dues when no one's looking. That's great stuff, Drew.
Are these answers too long, or do I need to shorten them
No,
up?
this is perfect. I basically navigate these conversations based on what you're talking about. I mean,
Okay.
it really is. I've got a handful in mind. If we don't touch them, that's great. I mean, especially the stuff you're sharing. All gold, all gold. So, Drew, tell us a little bit about because you do have. Yes, you're saying you're not a journalism today, and you're covering the Texans. I get that, but your roots are what they are, and you have literally been in the trenches. Firsthand how much you have to do in order to succeed. So, what advice, now knowing what you do know and the things that you have done, what advice would you give? And again, you've already given tons. If they're not picking up in between these answers, what advice would you give to an aspiring TV journalist, sports news, weather, whatever it may be?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, one of them is, the teams you cover and the teams you see. Obviously, there are stars, but if you got a bad long snapper, that can wreck a game. If your kicker doesn't make his kicks, that could be bad. If your nose tackle doesn't occupy two blockers, the other team's going to run free on you. So just remember that almost everybody that you work with or that's employed by your company is going to help you in some sort of way. So, I think if I'd have been a jerk and, not been respectful and anything, if I'd have come in, say, hey, can you guys help me with this air check? Oh, well, we're a little busy. I don't know if we have time for that. But I think, you built up a good relationship, and they were like, sure, let's see what you got. I think you got to remember everyone in the process. There's no little people. I would never refer to anyone as a little person in the Just remember, it's a team, and everyone's pulling that rope. So make sure you have some respect and have an appreciation for what other people do. And I think above all else, make sure you're a good listener. There's a lot of people, and you know this very well, there's a lot of people that can talk in this business, but there's not a lot of people that actually can listen and absorb information and then synthesize things and ask the great questions, formulate the great opinions, formulate the great sportscasts and whatnot. So you got to be able to listen well and pick up on things. And that takes time, because I know, man, when I was a younger guy, like, I got to get my next question in. It's got to be phrased perfectly, and I probably missed some nuggets that I could have followed up on and pounced on and really, fleshed out. So you got to be a great listener in that regard. And I know Giesenslaw said this, and I echo it. You got to be a great writer. Mm-hmm. It all stems from writing, and to be a great writer, I think you need to read a lot more than you probably do. I don't read enough, and I think I'm a pretty voracious reader. I'm reading a book every night, and not a book per night, but I'm reading from a book every night, and you're absorbing information during that. You got to make sure you're reading and you're well read, and I think reading across a variety of genres and publications and whatnot. So you got to be a great writer. You got to listen, and you got to remember, like, you are in a team game. A lot of times when your number's called, the spotlight's on you, but it's not going to happen without great help from great individuals, because there's a lot of talented people. This. A lot of talented people out there that could be much further up the chain than the people who are at ESPN, than the people who are on ABC Sports or CBS Sports or whatnot. It's just some of them have had good support, have had good connections, but others haven't. So, you got to remember everyone in this process.
Yeah, there's so much that I just want to reiterate that you just shared there. One of the first things that jumped out to me was the reading thing. Like, I just took reading serious the past couple of years. Just with you not reading a book every night, but I read every morning, so I kind of flip it there. But so much of what you said there, especially that reading part, stood out to me, because if you don't develop that thing between your ears, then the next person's waiting to take whatever opportunities ahead. So I love the listening part too. That listening part, because I was like you, I had my questions on my notepad, and I probably missed a good follow-up question. So I appreciate that transparency. Like, just be there having a conversation with them. Don't be worried about you're going to miss something.
And to jump in on that, your subjects will appreciate that, because they see that you're listening and you're actually absorbing what they're saying. And hey, we all have egos. We all want to be listened to. So when you're asking follow-ups that harp specifically on what someone said, you get better stuff, and you open that subject up 9 times out of 10.
100%. You get more to that heart of the story rather than whatever story that you went in there thinking in your own mind. So I'm glad you added to that there, Drew. Well, listen, Drew, I want to respect your time. And it's funny, we're going to end with this, coincidentally enough. If I forgot something when I would do interviews back in the day, it would be like, hey, did I forget anything? Is there anything that I missed? Anything you want to talk about? So I know there's so much that you could probably, dive into. I know we both could, the similarities, but anything in particular that comes to mind that you want to share about, your journey, your expertise, your experience that you want to be like, hey, I can't leave this conversation without parting with this wisdom?
I guess make sure you're doing your own quality control. Like, you watch what goes out there. You proofread what you read. But when you're on air, you go back and you kind of dissect the tape. You break down the film and you pick up on, well, should I be angled this way? Should I have said it some way differently? How much is my voice changing? I mean, I think you do have to do some quality control on yourself. Otherwise, it's just going to skitter off, into the atmosphere, and you're never going to really get better or grow. I think you always kind of want to stretch your mind, your professional strengths and weaknesses, and you got to make sure that you're on top of things. Hey, why was my tie askew on that? Why I should have checked that. Why did I have that little piece of white lint? That looks like who knows what. I mean, just very small things when you're going through your journey and your job as a journalist.
So as you were saying that, I'm thinking attention to detail, because in a few episodes ago, I've got a mirror right here, and I didn't look into it before I got on, and I had cinnamon roll icing on my face through the whole interview.
It happens.
And it's someone that I know that I did the interview with. She didn't even pick up on it, and I mean, it's out there for the world to see at this point. But attention to detail. I didn't look in the mirror.
For sure, yeah. Attention to detail is always going to be, especially in our business. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. Attention to detail is important, but certainly so in what we do.
Yeah. Well, Drew, thank you so much again for your time. I know I appreciate it. I know anybody that sees this appreciates it because they just got better just by listening to you.
Oh, thanks. That's really kind of you to say. I thank you for that.
And thank you for checking out this channel. If you found this content beneficial, I'd appreciate it if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share it with someone you think might find it beneficial as well, because this channel was simply started and created to serve you, to help others grow, to learn how other successful TV journalists do or did it. So take what serves you so you can get better faster and reach your next level.